I would love to be able to do this, but I just can't get there. Or who would say, like, I don't regret it. I'm glad it happened because here's the silver lining. No. Like, if I could Control Z and remove that stuff, 100% I would. I mean, it did a lot of damage. But it gives me a credible voice when I am talking to people who have had these experiences, and that is valuable.
Can you explain to me what you've learned about how you were 2 years old at the time?
Yeah.
Between the age of 2 and 4, you said.
Mm-hmm.
What is? I'm kind of asking about the mechanism here. What is happening in a 2 to 4 year old child's brain that causes the damage? Because presumably at 2 years old, you don't understand what's happening. You don't understand what this individual, this person who's older than you, is doing, and the context of it.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand what the mechanism of harm is to an innocent child who doesn't understand the context of what's going on here.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can really answer that particularly well with high conviction. But what I'll say is that I am blessed and cursed with a near photographic memory for some things. Mm-hmm. So you have the original injury, right? You have the original insult. But if you have, as I do, which is weird, but like I can draw the floor plan of almost any building, any restaurant I've ever been in.
That's great.
Even once. I don't know why that is, but I can do that. Now, there are upsides to that. There are a lot of downsides too in the case of abuse. And as you have greater and greater ability to navigate the world and realize what has happened, what is happening, what might happen, and you can recontextualize high fidelity memories, well, then you realize that that thing that was very weird at the time was a lot more than just weird, right? It was just straight exploitation and abuse. So that's the best answer I think I can give to that question.
It's similar to what Dr. Lisa Feldman told me. She's a neuroscientist who said, she told me this story. It's obviously an anecdote, so it's an N of 1. So obviously taken with caution, but she told me the story of a young woman who was abused by her uncle and lived a normal life. Everything was fine, slept well, then watched Oprah. And Oprah had on there an array of women that were abused when they were younger, and she recontextualized what happened to her. And from that day onwards, she had all the symptoms of someone who was abused. She had sleep disruption, health disruption, all these things, because she had suddenly, as you use that term, reconceptualized actually what had happened there.
Yeah.
This made me,
Yeah, I mean, look, I think people who have been abused are those who survive and do well afterwards in some way are become very good by force, by necessity at compartmentalizing. And if you look at some of the very, very top tier military, special forces units and so on, the percentages of those guys who have been abused, very high. Now, why would that be an asset? Well, if you're in battle, if you're in a chaotic environment where people are dying or at risk of dying, and you need to act effectively and calmly in the most disruptive, unpredictable environment imaginable, compartmentalizing is a superpower, right? Where you can basically detach and take this observer status almost as if you're watching yourself doing, kill and capture raids or whatever it might be. But when some of those folks come back to civilian life, the compartmentalization is a severe handicap and disruptor in family life, right? So that superpower becomes a super weakness. And I think that is true outside of the military for people who survive abuse. They may bury it completely, put it under lock and key subconsciously, so they don't even have explicit recall of the event until perhaps there's some triggering catalyst that brings it back up. They might just say, hey, look, that happened. It's terrible. Like, no need to dwell on the past. I want to move forward, which I think, frankly, is a viable strategy. I don't think everyone needs to go, put on their hazmat suit and unearth everything bad that has ever happened to them. I don't think that is automatically productive or helpful. Can make people really despondent because you can't fix the past, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say that in my case, that compartmentalization was on some levels very enabling, right? Like I could out-endure a lot of people in sports, in work. My pain tolerance was incredibly high, but there is a price to be paid when you cauterize certain aspects of yourself and disallow certain types of emotions. Like there are prices to be paid. And I will say that I think the potential and promises of psychedelics by and large are overstated. But in terms of bringing emotions back online, that was almost entirely due to psychedelic experiences for me.
Bringing emotions back online?
Yeah. So I hadn't cried in like 20 years. Couldn't remember the last time I cried. And then I'd be like on a plane watching a really compelling, kind of heart-wrenching documentary and just start crying on the plane. I'd be like, what the fuck is going on here? What the fuck? And certain emotions just came back online. And I think that once those were online, that is in part what then pulled along with it this revisiting of these high-fidelity memories. And then had a very rough period because of that, and ultimately decided, you know what, like this is the lead domino that has already been tipped over, that has affected so many things. I can continue to do patchwork, like remediation with Band-Aid solutions for various things, but I'm plugging holes in the side of the boat, not asking why it's filling with water in the first place. And I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to take 6 months, and I know psychiatry is pretty messy, but priority number one is to try to find some resolution with this. And that's what I did. I canceled everything because I was having basically like a nervous breakdown and wasn't sure I would be able to sort of function in a business capacity anyway. So, yeah, quite the adventure, quite the misadventure. But, you know, you play your hand the best you can. So having a podcast, having the books, having a blog has actually been incredibly therapeutic for me in finding some way to extract value from those experiences. And let me just mention this because I don't make anything from it. If people are going through any experience like this, or if they've had a history of trauma, you can just go to tim.blog/trauma, and it's got the conversation with Debbie. It's a hard conversation, but it also has a list of resources, because what I used as a toolkit and what Debbie used are completely different. So you get two very different perspectives on things. And I would say if I had to pick one other blog post in this case that was the hardest to put out, and also that I think I'm proudest of, it would be some practical thoughts on suicide. There's a post called Some Practical Thoughts on Suicide. And I know directly that has saved a few hundred lives. And it details my personal experience of almost killing myself in college, coming very close. Like I had a date on the calendar. And the only reason it didn't happen is because I lucked out. This is luck. So at the time, I was taking a year off of college to work in a few different jobs and ended up being very isolated because my whole class was graduating. My roommates at the time had full-time jobs, so I was just kind of stuck at home working on my senior thesis. Not a good recipe for mental health. And I reserved a book from the Princeton University Library about assisted suicide. And the book was out. Popular book, it would seem. And back in the day, the way the system worked is they would mail you a physical postcard to your address that was at the registrar's office. I had not updated my address to my off-campus apartment. So the card that said, "Good news, your book on assisted suicide has arrived at Firestone Library," got mailed to my parents. And that's what snapped me out of it, was realizing, oh, this isn't just about me. Right now, I don't have the plausible deniability. I was going to make it look like an accident. It's like, now I don't have it. That's been taken away. In retrospect, thank God. And so it didn't happen. But the reason I wrote that post is because I was at an event. I was actually being interviewed by Jason Calacanis on stage at this live This Week in Startups event. A few hundred people in the audience, and stuck around afterwards, and a bunch of people came up and wanted books signed and things like that. And there was one really nice guy, well-dressed, had himself put together, who asked me to sign 2 books, one for himself, and then he asked me to sign a book for his brother. And I said, "What would you like me to say to your brother?" And he just kind of froze. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want this guy to feel stressed out. I was like, I'll tell you what, we can figure it out, or you can just leave it to me. There's no rush. Like, we can do this after the event. All right, so took care of everybody else. And then the guy walked me to the elevator, and he explained, he said, "Yeah, sorry about that. I froze because my brother committed suicide. And we kept his room exactly how it was. And he was a huge fan of your writing. And so I wanted to get a book signed by you and put it in his room." And he said, "Have you ever thought about talking about mental health? Because you could really help a lot of people. A lot of people listen to you." And unbeknownst to him, I had all the history with coming this close to killing myself. And I sat with that, and I was like, yeah, he's right. He's really right. I have a responsibility to write about it. And that blog post took me at least a month to write and rewrite and have proofread, consider deleting. And because that was also something that my family didn't know about. I mean, they knew about the book, but they didn't realize how close it was. So that was also another wonderful call with family to be like, "So there's this thing about to come out." Should probably give you a heads up so you don't hear about it from everybody in the extended family. But
when your parents received that thing in the post,
yep,
that slip, the library slip,
yep,
did they call you?
My mom called me with this very shaky voice, being like, what is this? Why did you reserve this book?" And I lied. I said, "Oh, well, I have a friend at Rutgers, and he was trying to get this book for a research project, and they didn't have it at their library, so he asked me to get one through Firestone." But I was just lying. But I knew the jig was up, right? And that was the turnaround point. And that was also, because this was in 1999, where I just decided to go 100% into physical training. And there's a lot of backstory behind it. People can read about it if they want on that post, some practical thoughts about suicide. But it is so fucking common. It's very disturbing. Like, when you realize, it's disturbing and reassuring. It's disturbing because you realize how prevalent it is and how close so many people have come. It's reassuring because you realize also very quickly that you are not alone. You're not uniquely flawed. This doesn't need to be personal and permanent. People have solved for this. Looking at my audience over the last 10 years, every mental health complication or diagnosis that I can think of is up and to the right, just hockey stick. So chronic anxiety, treatment-resistant depression, you name it, right? Obesity, loneliness, which can take many different forms, usually self-imposed. And when I see a constellation of issues like that, I try to identify, if I can, not just the symptoms, because then you end up putting Band-Aids on things that are interrelated, but treating them as silos, but looking underneath it to see if there are root causes that we can address. So let me speak to that first. So on the mental health side, I'll just throw out a few things that have been very, very helpful. There are the behavioral questions, and I would agree that at its simplest level, you can just look at what we're evolved for, right? Just take a close look at evolutionary biology. Independence, lone wolf, is not in our programming. It just is not. So I would say when in doubt, revert on some level to what people were doing a few hundred years ago at the most recent, right? And that would be sort of assumption number one. Then I would say to people who are suffering right now, the social interaction, analog human interaction, I would just say is the one target when hit that solves a multitude of other problems that otherwise you'll be playing whack-a-mole with. But if there are then remaining problems with, say, chronic anxiety, OCD, when we get into some slightly trickier terrain, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, et cetera, there are a few things that I have found in the course of doing a lot of work with different scientists and also a lot of experimentation on myself, having grown up with multiple long-duration depressive episodes every year. And those are a short list of different types of brain stimulation, specifically something called Accelerated TMS. The before and afters that I've seen with that are beyond incredible and equal or surpass, in some cases, the amplitude of effect and the durability of effect of psychedelic-assisted therapies. Accelerated TMS, so Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation. And Dr. Nolan Williams at Stanford is a good person to look up for more on that.
What exactly is that? Is that putting something on your head and...
There are different ways to do it, depending on the hardware that you're using. But in effect, Accelerated TMS refers to a new protocol with better hardware and software of a technology, TMS, that has existed probably for 40 years, if not more on some level. And you will, instead of doing 2 or 3 sessions a week for many months, you do 10 sessions a day for 5 days straight. So you are getting stimulated on the hour, every hour for about 8 minutes. And you do that for 10 hours straight. And then you compound that over 5 days. And you see, for instance, to give one example, a friend's child, very terrifying story, but he was a cutter, this 14-year-old.
Self-harming.
Yeah. And the parents were just waiting for the call that their child had committed suicide. And this went on for 2 or 3 years, I want to say. And then within 3 days of accelerated TMS treatment, it was like reversion back to old self. And then with boosters every, say, 3 to 6 months, that has been durable. The before and after is impossible to overstate. It's pretty wild.
What are they doing to the brain? Is it electrodes, or is it music, or is it
It's magnets.
Magnets.
Yep. And what it feels like is someone kind of like flicking the side of your head. It's sort of the sensation. It is, from a safety profile perspective, really compelling. Like the downside risk is very, very minimal. And me, with the most recent sessions that I've done myself, I had probably 4 to 5 months of no anxiety. Like all of that stuff vanished as if by magic wand. And I felt like I'd been meditating twice a day for a year. I mean, it was incomprehensible. It was really, really, really remarkable. And there's good clinical evidence for this. It's not just N of one anecdote. So that's one, is the kind of neurostim piece. And there's a lot more that's going to happen in that space. But bioelectric medicine, that would be one big lever that I think is worth investigating if people are suffering with any number of different conditions. Then you have metabolic psychiatry. Primarily, that would be dietary intervention. Chris Palmer at Harvard is someone who's popularized this in the last handful of years. Metabolic psychiatry, specifically putting people on a ketogenic diet. You have folks who have been treated with 15 different medications for schizophrenia for a decade who get off all of their medications within 3 to 6 months and stay off, simply by stabilizing a handful of things in the brain, including adding a very beautiful, clean energy source, which is ketones. There are also a lot of possible applications of the ketogenic diet or modified ketogenic diets, exogenous ketones, meaning supplemental ketones, for neurodegenerative disease. So I have 3 relatives right now who have Alzheimer's. And genetically, I'm very predisposed. So I'm thinking a lot about this also from a preventative perspective. So can I potentially bolster mitochondrial health, cellular cleanup, reduction of plaque buildup, et cetera, by doing strict ketosis for a month a year, fasting for a week, perhaps once a year, water only? I think there's actually pretty compelling evidence that those are all worthwhile interventions to consider if you're very highly predisposed as I am. And then I would say the last one I'll mention now, the psychedelic-assisted therapies for various conditions. I do think that psychedelics, and this is to quote a very famous psychotherapist named Stanislav Grof, Stan Grof, what the telescope did for astronomy, what the microscope did for biology, psychedelics will do for the mind. I don't think that's an overstatement, because a lot of the clinical outcomes that we're seeing with treatment-resistant PTSD, people who've had an average diagnosis duration of like 14 to 17 years. Nothing succeeded. They do 2 to 3 sessions, and then you see like a 50+% complete remission of PTSD. I mean, what is going on there? I think in a very productive way, leading us to question some of the very fundamental assumptions that are made in the world of psychiatry, particularly with pharmaceutical interactions or pharmaceutical prescriptions. And that's really exciting to me, because I think there is an argument to be made that you can address certain root causes. And there are different explanations for this. Gould Dolan, who's now at UC Berkeley, she was at Johns Hopkins, talks about the reopening of critical periods for development. So you could potentially use psychedelics for stroke patients who are trying to relearn motor control. So I would say that those are broadly kind of the 3 pillars. There's one other that I'm digging into that I think could end up being very, very interesting overall. This is one that is sort of TBD personally. I am experimenting with it, but vagus nerve stimulation, there is a sea of bullshit floating around related to vagus nerve stimulation. The vast majority of what you'll bump into is pseudoscientific nonsense.
So if I'd never heard about vagus nerve stimulation before, how would you?
Yeah, I can explain it.
Yeah.
All right. So the vagus nerve is a bit of a misnomer, because there are actually 2 bundles of nerves that travel down from around your brainstem, down either side of the neck, kind of where you would feel your pulse. It's right alongside the carotid artery. Mm-hmm. And you can think of them as almost transatlantic cables. So you have 2 primary vagus nerves, but there are about 100,000 fibers in each of them. And we only know what a tiny fraction of those do. They then travel down and they innervate and touch pretty much everything you can imagine, including your gut. And there's some very interesting communication between the gut microbiome and the brain vis-a-vis the vagus nerve. It's wild. And the most credible voice that I've found in the world of vagus nerve